arriving. Thank you very much for joining us for what we wanted to be a little bit more pragmatic and specific to some operator needs. So we want this session, we will start by a little bit of presentation, but then we want really, we would like the session to be really live and to have a Q&A, very interesting Q&A session. So I hope you will participate to this discussion. So to support the questions, of course, if you do not have access to internet or the Slido system, we can always take questions live, and we will give you a microphone because the session is recorded, so we need to make sure that everybody is hearing your questions. Otherwise, you can use a Slido. Just because we are having two parallel sessions, we have changed the code you need to use. So the code is written on each slide. It's HLC stream B. So please, this one. And we will, as soon as we are finished with the presentation, general presentation, we will go to the Slido and try to answer the questions you could have on the specific category. So welcome again. I'm going to start by presenting the crew. Let me start, woman first, no? Okay. So we have Cristina, Hette, and Marco, and myself. Cristina, she has been working in EASA since quite a while now.
2011 now.
Yeah, 8 years. She's a project certification manager and senior project certification manager in continued airworthiness. She has been involved in various type certification projects, both on general aviation and UAS. And you are actively participating to rulemaking activities on UAS through JARUS. You are part of the Work Group 3 working on
CSUAS.
Exactly. And UK Working Group 105 as well. So thank you for being with us, Cristina.
Thank you.
I go on with Hette. Hette is as well working in EASA. He's a senior expert for navigation, communication, and surveillance. He's in EASA since a while as well. He has been involved in many certification projects, among the complete range from big aircraft down to general aviation. You are very open-minded. You are not focused on only one category of aircraft. You are as well involved, of course, in rulemaking and standardization activities. You are the co-rapporteur for Detect and Avoid in the ICAO AirPass panel, and you have very actively contributed to the Sora and on the AirRisk model in particular. Thank you, Hette, to be with us. Last person on my right, Marco DUCCI. Marco is working for Deep Blue. He's the manager for R&D since 2012, correct? You have been working on AirPass-related projects and involving the development of new technologies, assessment of safety for AirPass operation, so drone operation. You are as well a trainer. You just told me before the session you have been even giving a training on the Sora this week. I was not aware, but some people can share their point of view on this. So you are giving several courses, both for Eurocontrol and J training organization related to Sora. You are involved as well in JARUS since 2016. You are participating in the Work Group 6 activities, so the group who created the Sora. And you are as well involved in UK 105, like Cristina. And you are the deputy coordinator of the H2020 project, airworthiness drones, that we will talk about a bit later today. Yeah. Okay. Do I present myself? Yeah. Or somebody wants to do it for me? No? Okay, so I'm Alexandra FLORIN. I'm the EASA drone project manager, managing with Maria Algari, that you have probably seen today. She was presenting the use-based draft regulation. We are managing together all EASA drone-related activities, and this include development of the regulation, development of AMC and GM, discussing about what to do in the specific following industry standardization bodies, the research, and so on and so on. But today we are going to concentrate on the specific category. I guess you are all interested by this one if you are sitting here. So I've got just
Alexandra?
Yes.
Maybe for the people sitting in the back, there's plenty of room here, there's plenty of seats. So if you want to have a seat, it's going to be a long session. I don't know if you want to stand through an hour and a half. There's seats available on this side.
And I'm as well going just to repeat what I stated at the beginning. We have a couple of slides. I hope it's not too long. Because we want really to have a live session and answering your questions. And we are going to use Slido because it's maybe easier for people to express themselves through the Slido. Please be careful, the code has changed compared to this morning. It's HLC Stream B because we are having 2 sessions in parallel. So yes, please, this one, it will be repeated on all the slides. So just a couple of slides just to re-explain what we are talking about this afternoon during 1 hour and a half. You know that the European drone regulation has 3 different categories of operation: open, specific, and certified. And we are going to concentrate on the specific category. And we just wanted to re-explain what makes an operation falling into the specific category. So if you know the open category, what makes you falling into the specific category, it's as soon as you are exceeding the limitation defined in the open category. So as soon as you are flying beyond visual line of sight, or your drone is above 25 kilogram, or you are flying higher than 120 meter, or you want to drop some materials, or you are willing to operate in an urban environment with a drone above 4 kilogram, or you don't have the proper CE marking, which are requested in the open category, it's specific. So this is rather straightforward. There is another boundary with a certified category. So when are we falling into the certified category from the specific? It's when the risk for the operations are too high. And these include transport of people. The last 2 days we have discussed a lot about urban air mobility, including air taxi. As soon as you have an unmanned aircraft, which means no pilot on board, but with passenger on board, this is certified category because the risk of the operation is too high. Transport of dangerous goods, when in case of accident, the risk, the fact that to have dangerous goods on board will increase the risk for third parties on ground, make you fall as well in the certified category. And as well, when the intent of the operation is really to hover constantly above assemblies of people with a drone exceeding dimension of 3 meters, this is the certified category. So today, this afternoon in this session, it's going to be about the specific category. And Cristina will walk you through the different options you have to get authorized or to operate in the specific category.
Yeah. As you have seen, the specific category is defined by the others. It's defined by the boundaries of the open and the boundaries of the certified. What is in the middle is the specific. But how can you operate as an operator? Which approval do you need, or which ways do you have to operate there your drone? And you have 3 options. The first one is approval by authority. So under Article 12, you can get an operational authorization by your authority. To do that, you have to prepare a risk assessment. And in our regulations, we have 2 AMCs. One is the Sora, the famous methodology to prepare a risk assessment, the specific operations risk assessment developed by JARUS and published by EASA. And a second AMC that you have is this predefined risk assessment that we have published one for beyond visual line of sight with visual air risk mitigation, and the area is sparsely populated, so no crowds, nothing like this. So this is the AMC that you get to do your risk assessment and get approval by the authority. For other operations with lower risk, we have also the opportunity, you have also the opportunity to get a to just issue make a declaration to the authority, and the authority will send you a confirmation of receipt and completeness, and you can operate with that. But these operations are not infinite. They are not the higher risk. So we want to limit this to standard scenarios. Yes.
It was said at one of the last workshops in Cologne that standard scenarios are now just for the open category, while predefined risk assessments are for the specific category.
No, if you think the open is a scenario by itself. We already say, we give all those limitations. There's a visual line of sight, less than 25 kilo, drone with CE marking. The open category is totally defined. The standard scenarios are for the specific. And we have published 2. They are an opinion, but they are published and you can check. We have.
So it's really, I confirm.
Yeah, it's
all good.
specific.
And I'm sorry if there was a misunderstanding during the last workshop. Standard scenario are really for the lower risk of the specific category. And the main principle of the standard scenario, why they are declarative, it's because they are prescriptive.
Yes, they are totally
And there is a
defined.
concept of CE marking behind. So the prescriptive elements which on the UA, on the drone, which makes the operation safe, have been checked by a third party through the CE marking.
In the standard scenarios, it's like the authorities, we have done the Sora for you. And we came with the list of specific prescriptive requirements so that you can just make a declaration and operate directly. And there is a third option, it's more ambitious. You can have a light UAS operator certificate. This is not because the UAS is light, it's a light approval because it covers a low risk or a medium risk. But this operator has privileges in his scope. This operator is approved by the authority, and its scope of approval includes the kind of operations that he can do, the kind of drones he can do, and therefore he doesn't need to ask for an authority every time he's going to operate. He just continues his operation as covered by the look. I repeat, because I get this question very often, is a light drone needed here? No, there is no limitation for the weight of the drone.
No, it's you need to write it like it's a US operator certificate, but light.
Light. So the operator
So
is
it's
light.
not a light US
No.
operator certificate, it's a light US operator certificate.
Yes. The drone may not be light.
But that's the
That's the message. We have heavy drones.
If you're too heavy yourself, you don't get it, right?
The operator doesn't need to be light.
But like any, I mean, yes, it's a facilitator in order to avoid to very experienced operator to have to request authorization each
Every
time to their authority. But of course, like the DOA principle in man aviation, it will be submitted to oversight by the authorities. So, and it will be really bounded to some specific operation where the operator has already shown really experience to run those operations, and where there is already a very good trust relationship between the member states and the operator.
So the next slide is dedicated to show you where you can find this information in the rules. I don't know if you are lost. Sometimes I am a little bit lost with
Yes,
the EASA
don't worry.
publications. So this slide tries to illustrate what is published and where can you find the Sora, the predefined risk assessment, and the standard scenarios. The higher level is what we call is the binding material, is the rules. And we have divided into the implementing regulation and the delegated regulation. You can find both on the EASA web. The implementing regulation is for rules for the operation of drones. It covers the part open, the spec, and the look. And you have there the requirements for the operation of drones. So the standard scenarios are for the moment an opinion, and they are going into the implementing regulation. They are so far published as opinion. The delegated regulation, on the other hand, contains requirements for the drones. It contains all the annex for the CE marking and the requirements for the C0, C1, and the CE marking. And the AMC, the Sora and the predefined risk assessment is guidance material. AMC is acceptable means of compliance and guidance material, which means it's not binding. It's one way to comply with the binding rule, but not the only way. And if you have other idea, you can come to us and present to us other idea, because this is not the only way. The AMC1 is the Sora, and the AMC2 is the predefined risk assessment. And it's published separately on the web. On the EASA web, you can find everything. This is a little bit the structure. This is already available. Now, the future, what is coming. Next year will be very busy. We have in the second quarter we will make what we call decisions. It's new guidance material, new AMC, with updated Sora. If some of you have read the Sora, you may have noticed that in the urban operations we have a TBD, and we have to fill in the gray area. So we will publish something new in the Q2 for these urban operations beyond visual line of sight. And together we will provide 4 additional predefined risk assessments. 2 are mirroring the standard scenarios already published, and I was asking Alexandra, why do we do this before the meeting?
So now
why do we mirror standard scenarios already published to make a predefined risk assessment? And the reason is because the standard scenarios are totally prescriptive, as I told you. They are absolutely defined. You cannot deviate. If an operator needs to deviate from there, then he will not be able to use the declaration and to use this process. So to help the operator, we have gone a little bit higher and make this predefined risk assessment, which is like half Sora has been made for you. So
and it's relying on the C marking. So standard scenario, the declaration concept is always relying on C marking. But in case there will be a drone built answering the same requirements without the C marking, the predefined risk assessment mirroring the standard scenario will help the operator to get very easily approved or more easily approved by their authority. So we are
more guidance material for you.
We are really
to help
trying to facilitate the work of operators based on what is currently done in the member states. We can come back on this later this afternoon through the questions.
So this is in the Q2. Also, another case of beyond visual line of sight in sparsely populated environment. You see what the airspace has been reserved for this kind of operation. And another one with a drone highly automated out of the box, but used at 30 meters max. It is to do inspections above a predefined area, industrial area, or non-highly populated area. So this is coming in the Q2.
And again, it's really corresponding to
the needs,
current cases being authorized in the member states. And based on the experience acquired by the member states, we are trying to really harmonize the approach and scale up operations in Europe.
Then we have at the end of the year another decision with updated Sora, with including recognized standards. If you are familiar with Sora, you know all the appendix that we have there, and to show compliance for the different robustness levels, low, medium, and high. Sometimes we have, the drone has to comply with industry standards appropriate for medium or appropriate for high, but we don't say which ones. So this edition, I think, is critical, where we will include the industry standards that you can use to show compliance with these robustness levels. And also more AMC and guidance material for the standard scenarios.
So a lot to come. Thank you, Cristina. We wanted to give some highlights on the Sora, which should be known. So specific operational risk assessment, for those who do not know what the acronym stand. I love the view from here. I'm very happy that it's a successful workshop. Please welcome. There are still some places on the side here if you want to sit comfortably, because we still have 1 hour and 10 minutes of discussion. So don't hesitate to come closer.
You're still allowed to leave. The fact that you have a seat doesn't mean that you
Close
have
the
to
door. Okay, so Hette, since you are an expert on the Sora, you give us, like me, no? Ground risk, air risk. So you give us a bit of highlights on the Sora, what is currently in the Sora, where does it come from, and so on, and then what are the limitations of the Sora?
I'll try. So these are, normally I add 2 cents to a discussion. I guess these are my 2 slides to this discussion. So the Sora, essentially what we try to do is make it easier for operators who are not used to do safety assessments to perform a safety assessment that has, a reasonable level of credibility. And so what we try to get to is a systematic methodology that was holistic in its concept, that would look at risks associated with the operation of drones or UAS and add means to mitigate those. Something new that I learned in the past week is that it's based on the Swiss Gallo approach. Although I knew the Swiss had been working with this before, I wasn't aware it was called Gallo. And those were that project was linked to the Solar Impulse project. Since last year, or was it early this year?
No,
this year.
it feels
This year,
like
yes.
history, but it was just in October
Exactly.
that we published the AMC.
Here's the problem. I've been working Sora for the past 4 or 5 years. So
No, 3 years.
3 years.
We did it in 3 years.
Okay. A year is eternity in drone terms. So last year we accepted it as an acceptable means of compliance, and we're using it as well in the approval of flight conditions, permit to flight approvals. So next slide, please.
Have some applicants here for flight
Yes.
conditions and there's
And the PCM. So if there are some questions on how EASA is working on this, Cristina is a good person
Well,
to
I'll leave
answer.
them to you, Cristina.
Yeah.
So the current version of the Sora only addresses ground and air risk for a single UAS operation, and that's important to remember. We're getting a lot of questions about, okay, how do you deal with multiple drones operating in the same airspace? How are you going to deal with swarms? How are you going to deal with U-space and UTM? And it's good to remember that when we started this, a lot of U-space didn't exist. We were really looking at a single operation. So that's a limitation of the current Sora, and that's something that we will work on in the near future. The other aspect, we've tried to come up with a qualitative approach, but obviously people like numbers. So we've seen a lot of
It's
requests.
not exactly like this. We started with numbers.
We started with numbers,
There
then we
were a
went to
huge
qualitative.
amount of complaints and so on, and we said, okay, let's simplify and make the qualitative. And now that we have the qualitative approach, people are coming back and telling us, yes, but if I want to characterize the airspace, how do I know how many encounters in the in the airspace do I have to
Exactly,
consider
and
for an ARC B or an ARC C and so
And
on?
where
So
are the limits?
we started like this, we removed the numbers, and now that people are really familiar with the qualitative and wants to have more detailed assessment and more precise and not having this conservative approach, we will need now the quantitative approach.
And
People are ready for that now.
right. And just for your information, and maybe good to add, is a lot of people, look at the Sora and see, oh, this is all qualitative. Well, it's very good to know that a lot of what's in the Sora is actually based on studies, on tests that were performed, on scientific research that was done, and that was all quantitative. So, like Alexandra just explained to you, we went from quantitative to qualitative, and now there is this move back to qualitative in that sense. The other limitation, and I think Cristina already alluded to it, we refer to industry standards, or you need to have, you need to install a system, or you need to install a function that meets certain standards. We don't tell you which those standards are, because often we didn't know. Now that those standards are emerging, we really intend to make references to those.
Yeah, and it's a perfect transition to our next presenter. So Marco is going to talk about all the work which is being done by this H2020 project that I already mentioned to support the population of the Sora with appropriate industry standards.
Yeah, thank you very much. So yes, what we are doing with this AW Drones project is exactly this. So we are trying to help EASA in identifying the standards that can be recommended to comply with SORA requirements. So today I'm here on behalf of this H2020 initiative called AW Drones. So what is the issue? What we need to do in order to find what are the proper standards to be recommended? First of all, there's a need to collect information. So there are many standard making bodies working on the development of standards, but not only in industry standards can be used, but also guidelines developed at local level by competent authorities can be potentially acceptable means to comply with SORA requirements. So we are collecting all this information, we are evaluating it, and trying to assess to what extent each standard is able to cover a given SORA requirement. And by doing this, we expect to be able to rank the standards, recommend the best ones, and identify gaps, which of course will be there. So we started this activity 1 year ago, and we will continue working for 2 more years. And during this year, we focused our attention to the identification of standards to comply with SORA requirements. We'll have our first yearly report at the end of this year, beginning of January, which will be publicly available on the project website, so everybody will have the opportunity to look into it. Our deliverable will not be directly taken by EASA and used and recommended as such. Of course, EASA will review it, possibly apply changes, modification, whatever they deem necessary. But at least our work, since we are a publicly funded project, will be open to everybody and for knowledge. So we are a consortium of 12 partners working on this activity from all over Europe, research centers, drone manufacturers, operators. So hopefully we cover kind of the whole value chain, and we are able to really deliver what is expected by the drone industry. So what we did so far, we collected in our database almost 600 standards or guidance, and out of these 600 we actually assessed half of them, 300, as potentially suitable to comply with the SORA requirements. And out of these 300 we found out that there are still many SORA requirements for which there is no full coverage. So we don't have a single standard or more than one standard that is fully covering the requirement. So only 35% of SORA requirements are currently covered. 55% are partially covered, meaning that there is a standard which maybe covers a part of the requirement but not all of it. And there's a 10% of SORA requirements which are not covered at all. So we are identifying gaps, trying to assess how much it is necessary to actually have a standard to cover that requirement, and maybe the answer could be no. So we'll see, and you will have the opportunity to also be engaged, because we organize public workshops. So you now know that this project exists, and if you want to participate, you are more than welcome.
Is there a website?
Yes, awdrones.eu, aw-drones.eu.
Thank you, Marco. And for, I'm already anticipating some possible questions. We have another mechanism to work on industry standards between EASA and the various industry standards bodies. So when your group will have identified that for some of the OSOs, so operational safety objectives or mitigations from the SORA, there is no coverage, we will be able to feedback the EOSCG group to inform all those industry standards that, hey, here there seems to be a lack of coverage of industry standards, and try to steer them to recover the situation in order that in maybe in 1 or 2 years we have a full coverage.
Yeah.
So thank you very much,
You're
Marco,
welcome.
and I'm looking forward for the first deliverables. So that's all for our presentation, because I promised to keep it short, half an hour. We are good. So we have 1 hour of questions and answers. I hope you started to put your questions on a Slido. So let me move. No. Congratulations. You can as well ask your question directly, not use a Slido. Is it me who is not? No. There are questions? The Wi-Fi is... I can use my mobile maybe. Or but start in the... Okay. If you can ask questions like this, but use the mic, because we are recording the session.
I will start with a verbal question while you prepare the Slido. Your slide, the second slide of you, answered a question partially that I had, because it was the JARUS team that developed Sora that told us at one of the many workshops we had that Sora was only made for one drone in one zone. how do you think you can solve this with many, many drones, especially when we talk about U-Space? Will JAWS be involved? Will EASA do it by its own? How will the process be to come to a Sora that is more open to more drones and in going in the direction of U-Space?
Good question. There is an activity going on in JAWS that looks at mitigations that U-Space or UTM provides. And I don't know if Jared is in the room here. No, he's not. I do hope that that provides us with a means to look at multiple, the operations of multiple drones in a single, in the same environment. Because I do think that we need a system like U-Space, we need a system like UTM to actually do that. There is no other way to really, control to really make a good assessment without knowing how much other traffic there is, without really knowing how much manned aviation there is. And to come back to those ARCs that we currently have, and I like to really stress this, those are very generic descriptions of the environment, and they have a very generalized assumption of the density of the airspace in such an environment. Where there is better data, where the states or the ANSPs can provide you better data, that's the data that needs to be used. And that comes back to that question of quantification. We are trying to, and I'm working with my US counterpart, we are trying to define the limits for ARC. We know them for D and we know them for A, but we don't know where the differentiation between B and C is. And that's really what we're struggling with at the moment. We're looking into studies, we're looking into simulations to more precisely define where that boundary is, to give states and ANSPs the means to really distinguish between one or the other.
Just a short add-on question. I missed the term sense and avoid on the slide. Will sense and avoid systems also be part of your considerations?
I wish we could. Where sense and avoid systems are being developed, where they're becoming more mature, is for the larger drones, which are intended for international IFR operations. That's where the work of RTCA SC228 has been. That's where Working Group 105 is currently working. When it comes to detect and avoid in a low-level environment, it becomes a lot more difficult. Unless, and this is the big discussion that we need to have, perhaps with the GA community and with the people who provide the technologies, unless everybody is cooperative, it's going to be very, very difficult in VLL. So hence, we're not looking at it right now. We believe that strategic deconfliction is the answer for now. Until the point where everyone is cooperative, that's when we can really add sense and avoid or detect and avoid in low-level environments.
But what I would like to add on top is that I think it was repeated several times. I mean, we are doing something which was never done. When you look at manned aviation, we first had aircraft, and with the time passing and more operations, there was a need to regulate everything. Here, we need to write everything from scratch. And of course, we are not going to solve all the problem immediately. And the reason why the JAWS Sora and now the EASA Sora is limited to one operation is that we needed to start by scale up a little bit the operation and just start by one. I mean, I know where you're living, but I'm living in Germany, despite my French accent. I never see drones flying. So it's not that we are having hundreds of operations with 3-4 drones flying exactly at the same time, same location, and so on. So we are going to address this. U-Space is going to help us. JAWS is already working on an annex to really explain how to integrate, to use or take credit of U-Space services, UTM services, while doing a Sora assessment and I don't know if the question was answered, but for sure JARUS has the intention to work on looking at the risk of collision between drones and considering more operations than only a single operation. But this will come in the next years, probably. It will take time. Okay. I'm looking at the question. So we take the same rule as usual. The most voted questions come first. So I hope I've got an update. I have difficulties. I'm supposed to be super innovative, and I've got only difficulties with the IT tool this afternoon. So I hope I've got the latest update and that it's updating.
I can support, Alexandra. I can see the questions here
So
as well.
does EASA plan to differentiate between RPAS versus autonomous manned? Actually, it's part of the concept. I mean, on A320 or 737 today, there is already a lot of autonomy already embedded in those designs. So when we are looking at drones, unmanned aircraft, so without a pilot on board, which can be remotely piloted with really a ground station on ground where the pilot is using the C2. We are as well considering and preparing for the future for very automated operation. Because it's already coming. And I can come back to the slide that Cristina presented. Typically there are already, I know for sure in France, some very automated operation happening for industry site inspections, whereas really the role of the pilot is extremely limited to some specific tasks and so on. So it's already possible under the specific category, and in the certified category we are already working on integrating the level of automation. And we are not talking about full autonomy when humans are not involved anymore, but we do not make a distinction. We embed the concept of autonomy when we are developing the regulation on drones.
If I may add something, and see, in JARUS, EASA is working closely with JARUS. JARUS has published UAS that is for drones that are at least automatic, not autonomous. But now, and I have one colleague here, Giovanni, from JARUS Working Group 3, we have just started with a new task, which is for autonomous drones. So we have just started in the previous meeting, and we have discussed also with some colleagues from industry. Maybe some people in this room would like to join and support JARUS Working Group 3. So we have just started the work. It's a bit too early to promise, but I am EASA, I am in JARUS, so yes, we are looking at it. Really ambitious.
Okay, I go on with the question. There's a... Where is Raymond? Because I see that. Ah, okay. So you need to do something in Germany, Raymond, because I don't see enough drones flying in Cologne. There are no drones flying in Cologne.
Not because of the strict regulations. But it's not allowed above waterways, and since the River Rhine is just...
I know.
That's the reason why it's limited.
It's just that the CTR is quite wide, and Krista knows it. She needs to go really far away to be allowed to fly her drone. Okay, so there was a question raised by Raymond from Germany. Will there be a requirement in the LUC AMC that an applicant must already have successfully applied for Sora authorization several times before? So first of all, it's going to be an AMC, acceptable means of compliance, so we do not put requirement on it. But yeah, we can provide at least guidance material to member states that this should be the basic principle. I mean, you need to have a real good relationship already between the operator and a member state in order to get a look. So we have already put it in the regulation. We have discussed this several times with member states. It will be applied, but not immediately, because we need to get experience and it's safety first.
Somebody's asking what is the highest sale approved up to date. I don't know. I know the highest I have approved, sale 5. Sail 4, no, sorry, 4. The highest. We have approved flight conditions in EASA only. And in the project that we had, it was sail 4, the highest. But maybe national authorities have approved flight conditions or operations with higher? National authorities, maybe?
Really, we have this. I'm not aware. And Sail 4 is already quite a challenge operation. So.
Yes, hello. My name is Demir and I'm coming from Croatia. I'm a firefighter and I want to say a good job for everything that you're doing, but I'm seeing a problem for public services, for firefighters. How do we approach these new regulations and regarding Sora and everything? I can see that you are giving materials and stuff to drone operators, but we are part of specific, you know. We are flying when no one wants to fly, and there are some specific risk assessments that has to be done. So what do you suggest for us? What should we do? Thank you.
Should I go? They're all looking at me. Yes, please answer your question.
It's very good question.
So it's a very good question, but actually it's worse than you could imagine, because state operation, because what you're describing is a state operation, doesn't fall under the basic regulations. So in principle, all what we are talking about, the European drone regulation, doesn't apply to your operation. Of course, in your country, Croatia could decide for state operation to apply something to mirror our regulation and apply this. But as long as it's state operation, it's up to the National Aviation Authority to decide what they are going to ask you for.
Yes, that's not the question. I mean, like, we don't have to apply it, but we want to apply it. We want to fly safe. We want to make those SORAs. We want to make risk assessments because we want to develop the technology to help us in the future more than today. So what do you suggest? How to develop, for example, I'm a drone team leader and I want to open a drone education center. So I'm thinking in future, what are the steps that I have to do to give the firefighters and other public services everything they need so they can implement drone technology in the right way. Thanks.
I think the first thing will be trained already on the Sora, because when you, I wrote it, so I know what's within the Sora, and for me it's quite easy to navigate, but I think we all recognize that it's, when you have to apply it for the first time, it's complicated. You do not always understand why this and not why that. I will highly recommend already to get trained. There are several organizations already providing some very good Sora training. And I will advise to select one. We were discussing this with Marco. I mean, Marco is obviously, but there are other organizations than Marco providing Sora training. I think what's very important is to have a mixture of theory and practical training. So you need to have a concept of operation to work on this during a complete day and really trying with your trainer to go through the Sora and understand what needs to be done. So this will be the first step.
Okay, thanks.
May I add maybe something to that? I guess the difficulty that you're faced with is you're looking at doing a Sora assessment that is not specific to a location.
Yeah.
And so the only advice that I could give is try to look at scenarios that are typical for your type of operation and try to categorize those scenarios and then develop a Sora assessment for each one of those scenarios. I think that's probably the best suggestion that I could give you at this point.
Thank you very much.
I agree with Hette, and I have some experience in firefighting operations, and I would also suggest you have to include one part of coordination with the firefighters. They should be in charge of the operation, and one very strong mitigation that you will have, instead of organizing an emergency response plan, which is something about ATC, I think your operation needs to be coordinated with the firefighters. And the helicopters, they may use helicopters, they may have personnel on the ground, and these are the risks that you need to control. I agree with Hette, define your scenario and try to run the Sora on it.
I go on with the Slido questions. There are several, what's the highest cell approved to date? We did it. Which one do I use first? So DAL, Development Assurance Level, in the scope of OSO, Operational Safety Objective 4 and 5, can be blocking in some cases for DAL-B hardware and software playing to... it's you. I recognize it. Now I've seen. Hello, Joseph. I recognize the super expert questions. I worked with Joseph in the past on this DO. So DAL in the scope of OSO 4 and 5 can be blocking in some cases for DAL-B and hardware and software playing... How to cope with alternate standards? It's a very it's a very good question. What I can tell you is that I'm hoping that the industry will come with some alternative proposal, and in EASA, because the problem is not only for the specific category, the problem is as well on the certified category, and EASA has set up really a task force with the FAA to work on this and to work with the industry to see how we can cope with those problems, especially in terms of cuts, component of the shelf. So we do not have yet the solution, but the problem is really known, it's taken seriously, and yeah, EASA is working on it. It's just that we do not have the answer now.
Yeah. In addition, EuroCAE is working on, for the OSO 5, it's working on standard for the low and for the medium. But there's still work to do. The priority was put on the low, and I believe it's now in internal consultation. There is a guidance material you can use, but it's for the OSO 5. And the medium will take longer, so yes, it's ongoing.
I go on. I think I missed some question, but I will, and it's moving, so it's... where was Per? I think you were having a question on if the FAA is certifying a drone, will it be approved in EU by default under the bilateral? Stefan, you want to answer to this question? Because you are concerned. Well, it's no, in principle. By default, no. You want to, maybe, sorry, you are not part of the panel, but you are there and you are responsible for this, so maybe it's better that you answer. It's fine for you?
Yeah, in case the FAA has issued a certificate for the drone, we would expect that we receive an application for validation of this certificate, and then we would issue our certificate based on an agreed certification basis. So we have not yet experienced the process of validating a drone coming from a third country, so it's also something we have to learn how this works in detail. There might be the need to update the TIP, the implementation procedures, to really smoothen the process, but in general, we would validate a certificate that's issued by a third country authority.
Does it answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Is the look for big companies, or stop moving, or can a two-man entity apply for a look? For me, no, it's not for big companies, and as long as you demonstrate your abilities to manage operation and to make proper risk assessment and so on, it can be done by a small organization. Is the person who raised the question satisfied by the answer? Don't know, I don't see the person. Okay. What else do we have? Will it be, so Ricard, I don't know who is, where is the person? Will it be possible to CE mark an existing UAS to avoid the exception of the graveyard in 2022? So CE marking is mainly for the open. There will be some very specific cases through the standard scenario. But for me, yes, I mean, existing UAS, we can go and an applicant can go and ask for a CE marking. Will it be possible to CE mark an existing UAS? Yes. No? I know, because it's already put on the market.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so the answer is no, but I'm not a specialist of the CE marking. Is a Sora valid for only a single flight, or will it be an operational capability that is renewed on a regular basis?
Good question. I don't think the Sora is only valid for a single flight. It may be valid for a series of flights that are taking place in the same environment under the same conditions. I don't think, at least I don't work for a national aviation authority, but I would not like to see a new application for every day that you're going to perform the exact same operation that you did the day before.
On the other hand, I also don't think that an approval will last forever. I don't think that a national authority will like, for example, in the case you need restricted airspace, the authorities will not be very happy that you block this piece of airspace forever only for you. So that is.
Will redundancy in communication be mandated by regulation to perform BVLOS flights?
What? Latency.
Redundancy in communication.
Depends on the Sora. Depends on the category of
Which means
operation.
that the answer is no, because mandated by regulation, no. But if it's necessary to ensure a certain level of safety under the specific, yes. But not by default, because if there are appropriate mitigations put in place to avoid this, it's the beauty of the specific category. Huh? I mean, we have been accused during many years, or accused maybe with reason, to kill the innovation because regulators were too prescriptive. I believe that really the specific category is leaves a lot of possibilities for operators to propose, to innovate and to propose mitigations to ensure an appropriate level of safety. So the answer is yes and no, or no and yes. No mandate, but of course the level of safety needs to be demonstrated. So if necessary to ensure this level of safety, yes. What then? Sorry. Yes, sure. Just come closer. And you were the one raising the question?
No, I didn't. But it's kind of a follow-up question. I think it's an important one in terms of how much is an operational authorization tied to an actual location in terms of GPS coordinates. I always understood, based also on the discussions this morning with EASA, that an operational authorization is in fact not tied to a location in terms of defined by GPS coordinates. You can use the same operational authorization and move it to another location for as long as it has no impact on your Sora. So it doesn't not only have no timing dimension, but no geographical absolute location dimension tied to it either, unless I misunderstood. I just wanted to...
It's absolutely correct. And there is even a provision, because the authorization needs to be requested to the member states where the operator is registered, but if this operator would like to perform the same operation in another member state, the fact to have received already this authorization makes the approval process in the other member states easier. So no, it's not tied to a specific location, but the operator has the obligation to stay within the boundary, the limitations put by the member states in the authorization. So all the local conditions needs to be complied with permanently, of course.
I think the firefighting question that we got before is the perfect example. The Sora assessment is done for a scenario. Where that scenario takes place, they never know where the fire is going to break out. So it's not location specific.
Although I will say for firefighters, one could claim that the risk is, in order to save lives and to save the lives first of the firefighters, it's maybe worth taking a bit more risk and authorize more easily. But it's state operation, so it needs to be discussed at national level and negotiated by the member states. But maybe there is a compromise between safety risk and safety benefit in your specific case.
And several members, at least I know one, Spain has adopted the Sora for the national rules.
Yes,
so
I'm not surprised.
And in Spain we have a lot of fire.
So it's an answer, but it may be that the Sora, for this case, is because the Sora is not taking credit of any safety benefit that such an operation could bring, and there could be some alleviation decided at national level, because again, it's state operations, so the member states can decide what is safe enough and to sell it to their citizens.
Now I'm curious to see this scenario and to run the Sora and see what happens.
As I go on, can you help me? Because I don't have I cannot sort out which one. Pierre Daniel, you are there or not? No, I thought somebody will help me. Ah, Laurie, you are rescuing me. Can you help me to kill the questions when they arrive? Because I've got difficulties. So which one? When will the LUC standards be available for training of these pilots? Honestly, I don't understand the question. Is Curtis... could you maybe rephrase your question? Because I'm not sure to understand the question.
So
Sorry.
your training standard, you're offering a license, more or less, for the UAS, right? License for, the LUC is more or less a license for that, for an unmanned platform, correct?
It's a light unmanned operator certificate. It's a certificate for the operator with privileges.
Yes. So if you've got an operator certificate, could you not, I mean, there's got to be a training standard offered with that, right? So that other people can get trained to receive something like that. I mean, how are you going to...
No, it's not the principle of the LUC. I understand that it's a little bit confusing, and I believe it's even a little bit too early to discuss about that, because I believe that the LUC is not the solution to operators' problems today. The reason why a LUC was introduced was to say, is there operators really always performing the same kind of operation, but changing just a little bit the conditions and having to go back to their authorities each time to get authorized and so on, because they are very familiar and they have demonstrated their capability to handle those operations in a safe way. We can give them a privilege to approve themselves their operations in order that they do not have to go back to member states all of the time to get authorized and so on. So it's a facilitator, but if you are operating for the first time, I think it was a question of Raymond. I mean, does it make sense to give for member states and National Aviation Authority this kind of look to operators who have never operated or who have really who are only coming 1 or 2 times a year to an authority? I don't think so. I mean, it's really to avoid overloading operators who will have always to make some small adaptation and go back always. It's a facilitator, but it's not the solution. I mean, you need to control your operation first.
And what I was wondering with that, though, is like in the instance of the firefighters, where they're operating in an unknown time, having somebody that is proficient in an aircraft, they may operate every day, they may operate or train with it on a regular basis. Is that not the solution to solve some of that stuff, so you're not dealing with SOARs all the time, that you have operators that are using the same equipment, they're not using general equipment, they're using the same equipment all the time to perform their flights, or videographers, or agricultural operators, any of these things.
So it's really what we are trying to do through the standard scenario, predefined risk assessment, and so on. We are trying to help operators to facilitate all the authorization process. But I mean, in the case of I think the case of firefighters is again very specific, because they never know where they are going to operate. They never know whether it's in the countryside, in the middle of the city, whether it's night or day, or it's a controlled airspace or uncontrolled airspace, and so on. So it's a very specific case, and again, I will recommend not to focus too much on this today, because it's outside of the scope of it's state operation. This regulation does not apply to them, and on top, I believe they can beneficiate of the safety benefits brought by the fact that they are firefighters, and that they are most probably going to save life than kill people by using a drone. And they are going to save the life of the firefighters and avoid firefighters to be sent to make a recognition. So I think there is a real added value, but it's really outside of the scope of this discussion today.
So Alexandra, maybe if I understand the gentleman correctly, maybe if I ask the question in a different way, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the LUC there to provide a level of mitigation for some of the Sora criteria? Yes, I can. Is the look intended to cover, as a mitigation, some of the elements that we require in the Sora? For example, training, competency, those type of things. If you have a look, can you go to the Sora and just tick the boxes there and say, yes, I meet this because I have a look?
No, yeah. No, no, because it's not a driver license. Yeah, but it's completely different. It's the look is like as if it's the Lufthansa case. They are operator, but it's not because they are operators that they can operate without having pilot having a license. And the license scheme of the pilots is completely independent from the approval of Lufthansa or Air France as an operator. So it's two different things. It's two different approval. We are not looking at the same thing. The look is the capacity of an operator to run a safe organization and to properly assess the risk of an operation, to auto-approve their operations based on the Sora. It's not a training organization for remotely piloted.
I'm not saying for a training organization. I'm saying for if the person is trained and they're
trained to what?
If they're trained on unmanned platforms, if they're trained, they have performed their SOARs, they know how to do that. They understand the risk assessments. They understand. Would that certificate not be a way to that circumvents having to file all the time? That you're being able to reuse all the time, and to do that, what are the standards that EASA wants to hold a loop?
May I? Yeah. So the way I understood the LUC is that the look is a certificate for the organization. So in order to get that, you must have inside the organization developed your safety management system, your quality management system, your system to ensure that all your personnel is competent, and possibly, speaking about the activity we are doing in AW Drones project, you must be already also qualified according to an industry standard. So there is a standard from ISO, for example, emerging about UAS operations. So in the future, operator might be qualified according ISO number whatever as a UAS operator. If you have all those things in place together, I guess you can then apply for a look to your competent authority and get it. And this would give you a privilege.
Now, when is those standards going to be approved? I mean, what are those standards going to be? I mean, is that
We don't know yet because we are building everything, and it's linked to it's what we are doing. It's not, we need standards everywhere, but sometimes the industry has not developed yet the standards, and it's all the work that the H2020 Readiness Drone Program is doing, is to go through all the existing standards related to drones and see where they could be recognized by EASA to facilitate the work of an operator or a pilot or whatever to show compliance with certain operational safety objectives related to training and so on and so on.
Excuse me, I have a question. That means that all operators will get a look or not?
No, of course not. It's a facilitator, and you don't need. What's the need for you to get? I mean, it's a facilitator. It's to avoid going back always to the authority. But I mean, it's a privilege, which means that you are under the oversight of the authority giving you this authorization as well. So is it worth paying? Because then we will talk about the cost. We had an implementation workshop back in July. There are some certain national aviation authority which are going to set the costs or the fees associated to getting this approval rather high. So it's going to be a balance. It's like for DOE in man aviation, it's going to be a balance between the number of authorization you need to ask every year and how much it costs you, and whether it's really, from a business point of view, worth asking to have a look in order, because having a look is cheaper than going always 6, 10, 20, 30 times per year to your authority to get authorized for a different, slightly different operation. But the look is just an option, and it's just giving privilege, but all operation can be authorized without a look.
Maybe I can show the slide of the 3 options that you have for the specific.
And just to fill the silence moment, Luke indicates that you are a major operator which can deal with the high risk of unpredictable scenarios. So this is in contrast to the standard scenarios where you are well to go after you submit a declaration, you can fly. Luke indicates that you are grown enough to deal with the complex situations. In order to acquire a look, you will need months of months has to pass. You will need to submit thousands of documents to authority, and they will be checked. And you have to expect the audits and inspections on site. So this is really something serious. But I have nice news for you regarding the training of pilots. If I'm not mistaken, for the standard scenarios, once an operator submitted some standard scenario, and he's theoretically eligible to train the pilots for this standard scenario. And I put another question related to this. Maybe I can spread the word about it directly. The question was, if I apply for standard scenario and want to train my pilots, is it enough to apply to put just one submission, or I have to wait until the standard scenario approved, until I get the automatic reply, and I have to separately submit another declaration to train? So is it possible to submit a standard scenario which includes training of pilots for this scenario at once, or I have to put it in 2 different submissions? This was my question.
Yeah, if the standard scenario is asking you to get a specific training first for your pilots, where you need to have the proof of completion of a specific training, you need to first get your pilots trained and get them having those competences before declaring that you can operate. I mean, it needs to be done in a logical order. So first you train your pilots, you make sure that they are competent, you get the proof of competencies, and then you can declare that your pilots will be operating and have been trained according to this. How can you declare that they are competent if you didn't get the proof of competence?
Version of the documentation, where imagine one of my pilots get retired or is ill, but having a submission for standard scenario, I'm eligible to learn to teach another pilot, because it's a standard scenario, it's not a sophisticated scenario. So this was the question, and I think it's already considered in the last issue.
Yeah, I think in this case, the first what you need to do is to operate safely, which means that if your pilot has changed and is not trained, you postpone all your operation, you get the pilot trained, and then you check if the declaration you made is still valid or not. If it's still valid because your pilots are trained appropriately, you are good. If it's not valid anymore because there's one of the conditions which is not met anymore, you need to resubmit your declaration. But I mean, it's always checking. The basic principle is, if you operate under a declaration and operate under an authorization, you always need to make sure as an operator before the flight that all the conditions put in the that you have declared are met, or which have been put in the authorizations are met. So this is the first question to be asked by yourself. Am I going to operate under the conditions set in the authorization, or under the conditions that have declared compliance with through the declaration?
Thank you.
Okay, there is a question regarding standard scenario predefined risk assessment. How do we in EASA decide for standard scenario and predefined risk assessment? How are they born, and can we request one? So the basic principle is that EASA is here to harmonize practices. You were the one asking the question. We are here to harmonize practices in the member states. So, and especially standard scenarios are extremely prescriptive. So the idea is we are not going to invent from scratch a completely new standard scenario predefined risk assessment which has not been already proposed by an operator and already authorized or authorized. So the way we are working with the member states is that we are doing regular survey regarding which kind of operation, what is the market, what is the need from the operators operating in your country. So we are working closely from them. We have a collaborative platform, and all the standard scenarios we are proposing are based on the experience of 1, 2, 3, 4 member states. Especially the standard scenario we had proposed, the two first one, the VLOS in urban, above control area, and the BVLOS. It's really inspired by what's happening in France and in Spain. So it's a basic principle, harmonize your approach based on the experience from member states.
I already have a question about the standard scenarios. Currently, it's quite clear that the practical skill assessment can be provided by the operator. Am I right?
Sorry, again, sorry.
Practical skill assessment. Practical skill assessment for the standard scenarios can be assessed by the operator or entity.
Honestly, I don't know it by heart. And so we need to go back to what we have, what EASA has proposed in the text. So if
I'm pretty sure that yes.
In the specific category, there's no certainty. So we have proposed things, and
but my question is, well, actually, I have two questions. First, is there going to be developed more standards for the training? I mean, more detailed requirements, or is it up to the operator? And the second part, what about operators who are natural person, for example, 16 years old?
Okay, so the standard scenario are not yet finalized. It's in an opinion, and we can discuss whether the level of details we have put within are enough, but the intent is not to develop further requirements for those standard scenarios than the one which are currently contained in the opinion. So we consider that what's within is enough for an operator to develop the training for their pilots. Is it answering the first question?
On one hand, yes, but on the other, we as the authority, how should we make sure that, well, this training program is good enough and this is not?
It's under declaration. So it's a responsibility of, first it's the responsibility of the operator to assess whether it's good enough and to declare that it's good enough. And then during the oversight, we will provide, I mean, we can rediscuss this. This is implementation and nothing is perfect. I mean, sorry, because now I know who you are, sorry. This is part of the discussion. What we want is to develop the collaborative platform and exchange between member states. So currently we are learning by doing. So this is our proposal, and if there are good practices, how to make the oversight of those organizations declaring the training and so on, we will provide guidance material based on this, and we will harmonize the practices. But so far, we have considered, and you can comment on this. Next week we will be in Brussels to discuss this, and so it's not the end of the story. But we have considered that it's good enough for an operator to define an appropriate training to support the operation. You had a second question, but
no, the second question was related about this. If the operator is not a serious company, for example, but just 16 years old.
You think that a 16 years old guy is not serious enough?
Okay, 18 years. Well, our experience has shown that sometimes.
I think that some kids are very skilled. I mean, I didn't follow this year, but I followed the racing
there's
last
room
year.
for discussion.
They are very skilled with their drones, and much more than.
No, but our experience has shown that during the practical assessment, even very serious people from serious companies are missing very important skills. And when they come to the assessment done by more or less professionals, they say, "Whoa, we're very happy that we actually did this assessment by you." Because when we read the requirements, we were pretty sure that we are good enough, and now we realize that, okay, we need additional
So I
training.
really invite you to comment our proposal, because the standard scenario are not finalized. They still need to be discussed at the commission level and so on. We have up to February, so please, if you have a proposal to improve what EASA has, I'm all in. I mean, it's collaborative, working together, so please provide this feedback, and we will assess it and discuss with you and probably improve our proposal. I'm not only frozen, now I don't have the question, so can somebody...
We have a Jarus question, I can take the opportunity to reply. So 4 people are asking if they have a technical question on the CS UAS or CS LURS, or they're produced by Jarus, if they can approach EASA for clarification and how. Of course, you can approach EASA for clarification. On Friday, I replied the last question about CS LURS, and I do this in total coordination with the Jarus colleagues. So I give them a call, do you reply this one or I do this one? And we both copy each other. So I think you can go to Jarus or Working Group 3, or you can come to me. And how? Do we have in EASA a generic email address? Or?
Yeah, we have the... Laurie, you know it by heart because you're the drone at EASA Europa EU. So drones with an S at easa.europa.eu. Okay, maybe, yeah. So we are receiving, so we are in the process. There's still a lot of things to be done at EASA level. We are working on there was no action. I mean, the regulation is quite complex. With the AMC, it's a lot of pages and so on. So we are typically working on electronic flight rules. How's it called? It's not electronic flight rules. So PDF with hyperlink and so on in order to navigate easily. And we are obviously answering questions, and we are working on gathering the most frequently asked questions in an FAQ, which that we hope to publish within the next 3 to 4 months. So do not hesitate to raise questions. I mean, member states are already, but through this mailbox, and we try to answer as quick as possible on this.
I don't know if this is, this is on. I have a question, since the mobile doesn't seem to work, but it specifically relates to the collaboration between JARUS and EASA. I've noticed that in the latest AMC, where the Sora was introduced as an applicable means of compliance, it deviated on one single point between the Sora as it was issued by JARUS, and that seemed odd to me, and it was in the GRC of BVLOS over urban area.
Yes.
I was surprised to see that
I'm the guilty one. Shoot me. I can explain. It's a good question. I forgot that I was expecting this question, but I'm very happy it's coming because it's a very important point.
And I only discovered it by doing a word compare, by the way. At the start of the AMC, it clearly refers to version 2 of JARUS, but then secretly hidden there's one deviation. What was
TBD in the gray area?
Yeah, but
exactly. Yeah. What was the reason for that?
So several things. So first of all, national regulations still apply up to 1st of July next year. Okay. What we wanted was to give an idea of the direction we are going as quick as possible. So we have published Sora at 90% in line with JARUS. There were a lot of discussion. What you are referring to is the fact that BVLOS urban operation in the ground risk table are in TBD. In fact, it was a quick way to, we wanted to postpone the discussion on BVLOS urban because there had been incidents in Europe and discussion within EASA at European level with the Commission and the Parliament, whether it will not be safer and answering societal acceptance to request for this BVLOS urban operation a certificate by EASA. So this has been long discussed, and because we took the decision to keep on discussing within EASA and to postpone the decision on the BVLOS urban case. So to put TBDs in the GRC table was a quick way to postpone the discussion. So it's, you can shoot me, I did it. So now I can tell you, because we discussed this, so now I can tell you what we are going to propose, what's going to happen. Up to 1st of July 2020, the national regulation apply. Okay? By 1st of July, we need to have a complete SORA, because otherwise it's a problem. So we are going to, what we want to do is to publish an NPA specifically for that, proposing, and it will be open for comment, proposing what we have decided within EASA, and I can tell you what we have decided. So what we have decided is to keep on, for this BVLOS urban operation, proportionate and risk-based approach. So the idea is we are basically going to put back the numbers in the GRC table like they were for the JARUS. We will let operators proposing mitigations, design mitigations, operational mitigations, and so on, and arrive, depending where they are, at a specific sale. All the others will be determined by the sale as it is today. The only thing is that for the design-related mitigations and others, we are going to ask a high level of assurance, which means a third-party validation, which means for Europe an EASA certificate. Of course, the type certification basis will be, and Stefan, maybe you, if there are further questions, you can, because this is going to be under your remit. The type certification basis will depend whether the operation is cell 1 or cell 6, and will be proportionate to the risk. So this is what we are preparing. We are working on it, and we expect to have an NPA rather close in order to have an update of the SORA by 1st of July next year, in order that all operations under specific are covered by our AMC.
Thank you. Yeah, I failed to introduce myself. I should have done that. My JP from SKYS, Belgian ANSP. And I came up with this question because we were involved in the Sapphire project, which had a BVLOS flight in urban area, and that's how we stumbled upon that. That was the background.
Some more Slido questions?
We have 5 minutes left, or we go earlier to coffee. If we are done with questions, if we have answered all your questions, or maybe some people want to share their experience with the SORA, or I don't know.
Maybe I could continue on sharing it. We in the Sapphire project, which was a CESAR-funded project, we had 8 simultaneous flights in the harbor of the Antwerp harbor. And we used Sora quite thoroughly to do all the risk assessments together with the 6 operators. So for us, it was an extremely useful tool going forward to make it applicable to both very simple operations up to the most complex BVLOS urban area operations. So we very much enjoyed the availability of that approach.
Thank you. Any lesson learned or areas where, because you have used it, you have experience where we have already discussed, I don't know if you were there at the beginning when we were mentioning, it's the beginning of the journey. I mean, people believe we are done with the SORA. I think it's only the beginning. We will have update improvements, introducing of quantitative methods, linked to use space and so on, but addressing several operation and drone-to-drone conflict or collision. Anything else you would like to add based on your experience?
Well, I missed the first 10 minutes, but what I saw on the slide was I think what we missed in that particular project was we had to make a separate risk assessment to cover the interactions between the several flights, because a Sora is a single flight approach. So that was the part that we had to add in terms of CONOPS and in terms of mitigations across operations. But so that I think is work in progress that has already been identified. So that's the good part to maybe tap into your comments. I think it helps a lot to demystify a lot of those approaches by making it really quantitative, by putting numbers on it, by making checklists. That I think is a big help for operators. I think there's a lot of effort to do in terms of training, which you also addressed. But I don't think there's much of an alternative available today that is as usable.
Thank you.
Maybe, Alexandra, this ties into a question that is still on Slido. My phone still works. The question is, are you getting any feedback from authorities who are receiving and reading SORAs? What do they like? What needs to be improved? Is the workload acceptable? We don't have a central repository where people can provide feedback on SORA, do we?
We have. I mean, the question was, generally speaking, operators or member states?
The authorities.
No, authorities, we are having this collaborative platform. So we are meeting regularly. I will say I have the feeling to meet member states every month at the moment for the various topics. So, but no, we want to get this feedback and improve and harmonize their approach. And what we are as well facilitating is connection if there is a member state having some difficulties or facing some operations that they have never approved before. What we want is to use this platform to check whether some other authorities in Europe have faced this kind of operation in order that experience and lesson learned can be shared and mistakes avoided and so on. So we are really trying to put in place this collaborative work between member states and EASA playing the broker role in this story.
And the standard scenarios are proposed by the member states, aren't they?
Absolutely,
When they are working in their countries.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have time for one more?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I think this is quite interesting as well.
No, the tricky ones. So, okay, if it's a tricky one, you answer, Hette. I'm sitting and I will decide whether
the question is,
I answer you.
For some CAAs, the CE marking is apparently not enough, and they ask individual airworthiness assessments of the UAS. Do you see this changing in the future?
Yes, absolutely, because the CE marking, again, in the European regulation will be requested either in the open category, and in the open category there is no involvement of authorities, so the rule apply, or in the specific category in the lower risk, but it's based on declaration, and the authority cannot ask for more because the standard scenario are already exhaustive. So there will be no possibility for member states to add something unless I'm not aware of something.
There is no approval.
I just want to say that at the moment there is no drone on the market that is CE marked according to the requirements of the Delegated Act 945. So that's probably the reason why authorities are asking for more now. When there will be a drone which is CE marked according to the regulatory requirements, maybe it will change, or I guess. We call it a day or an afternoon.
Can I ask one more question? Unless
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to monopolize the questions.
If
But
people are unhappy, they can leave. We have no, please.
No, it might be interesting for other countries too. There's a lot of questions, at least among the people that I spoke with, on the famous national scenarios, because waiting for scenarios to be added through Appendix 1, national authorities can define their own national standard scenarios. There's some questions and unclarity on up until what time or until when can you still, I would say, publicize national scenarios, and because the implementing act specifies that once they are overruled by European one, you can no longer accept declarations based on national scenarios, but there's some ambiguity on the timing and how long you can define national scenarios.
Yeah, I think there is no ambiguity because the transition requirements are written in the law. The thing is that I know that I don't know everything, so Natalie will answer to you immediately. He knows this by heart. So what I'm proposing is that the slides will be available anyway. I still need to ask Marco if I can. Okay, so he got me. You are all witness. So we are going to make the slides available. We have some slides within EASA trying to clarify all those transitions in the open and in the form of schematic, because if you, I'm an engineer, I'm not a lawyer, and even me, when I read the transition requirements, I'm just like, can you do a schematic? So Natalie has done it. I'm going to add them to this, so it will be available. And again, if you have more questions, if you still believe it's not clear, please address your questions, drones@easa.europa.eu, and Laurie will transfer them to me. Wait for until Monday, because this weekend I'm not answering any questions. I want to thank you all. I hope this was useful for you, and we all hope to see you next year to the next conference. Thank you again.